Wow, this is a very big deal.
This is a huge deal. Here you have Chief Justice John Roberts appearing to push back on statements President Trump made earlier today, suggesting that a judge, James Boasberg, who of course temporarily blocked deportations by the Trump administration, or at least tried to, should be impeached. And here the Chief Justice writes, "For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose."
Let me say this clearly. Even Chief Justice John Roberts, the same man Trump once liked to present as part of his conservative court legacy, has now publicly pushed back against him, and Washington noticed. Trump is sitting in the Oval Office, furious after another courtroom defeat, demanding that a judge be impeached simply because the ruling did not go his way. But this no longer looks like ordinary anger. It looks like fear. His supporters are already panicking, and the Capitol feels tense because everyone can sense that a major moment is approaching. This is where Trump's power begins to crack under the weight of the same legal system he once believed he could control. Now look at what is happening outside the Capitol, because that is where the panic becomes visible.
The supporters who were on the mall, who were agitating outside the Capitol building, then moved up the steps and into the building, with Capitol Police now addressing that in front of lawmakers on the House, saying there has been a breach of the Capitol building.
You need to watch the footage from outside the Capitol. These are the same people who claim every day that they stand with law enforcement, but the moment Trump faces real consequences, they start pushing through barricades and putting pressure on police officers. The fear is visible. The panic is real. They know Trump is no longer untouchable, and that truth is shaking the entire movement. The chaos outside the Capitol is not random. It is happening because they can feel the walls closing in. This next part shows the moment that began the entire legal battle.
Over the weekend, President Trump stepped up his attacks on federal judge James Boasberg, calling him a, quote, constitutional disaster. Now the showdown between Trump and the judiciary enters a new phase, heading to the U.S. Court of Appeals in Washington as the administration looks to reverse Judge Boasberg's order, halting some deportations.
Mr. President, do you think you have the authority, the power to round up people, deport them, and then you're under no obligation to a court to show the evidence against them?
Well, that's what the law says, and that's what our country needs.
At issue is the deportation of hundreds of Venezuelans who were flown to a notorious prison in El Salvador last weekend under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, despite Judge Boasberg's verbal order to turn the planes carrying them around.
After seeing those scenes, with barricades falling and police struggling to keep control, we need to return to where this all started. Trump went on Truth Social after Judge James Boasberg temporarily blocked his deportation flights under the Alien Enemies Act. Trump exploded in anger, called the judge a radical left lunatic, and demanded that he be impeached. But only a few hours later, Chief Justice John Roberts issued a public statement that changed the tone of the whole situation. Roberts reminded the country that for more than 2 centuries, impeachment has not been considered the proper response simply because someone disagrees with a judge's ruling. Now let's look at why this ruling hit Trump harder than anything before.
In a long-awaited ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court Monday handing a partial win to former President Donald Trump. The justices deciding that presidents, quote, are entitled to immunity from prosecution for official conduct while in office, though they can be prosecuted for actions taken in a private capacity. The dissent essentially said that the majority gave the former president and all future presidents more power and more protection to commit misconduct. What does this mean?
Well, what it means is this. If you take this decision and you couple it with the January 6th charging decision, it means that presidents can go to extraordinary length to not only maintain themselves in power for a second term, but also to set the stage to maintain others in power after they leave in ways that the framers of the Constitution never contemplated. In other words, it opens the door to all kinds of dirty tricks and foul play.
He made clear that appeals exist for exactly that reason. That statement mattered because chief justices almost never step into public political fights this way. Supreme Court justices usually speak through decisions, not public warnings. So when Roberts directly corrected Trump, it carried real weight. It was not just a legal reminder. It was a message that the courts do not belong to Trump, and judges cannot be punished simply because they rule against him. Trump thought the courts were his playground, but now the message is clear. The guardrails are still there. Trump believed the presidency gave him ultimate protection, the idea that he could do whatever he wanted because he was president. But now that confidence is turning against him. Here is where Trump's legal protection begins to collapse.
To the surprise of many, including, I'll be honest, myself, the Supreme Court has denied Donald Trump's bid to stay his criminal sentence. He is scheduled to be sentenced tomorrow to no jail time, but as of tomorrow, he will officially be sentenced for the 34-count felony conviction in New York. The Supreme Court asked and answered. They have said no to Donald Trump's bid to stay his sentencing.
The decision came down as a sharp 5-4 ruling, and Chief Justice Roberts, the same man Trump once bragged about, sided against him. Roberts joined the liberals and made it clear that defying court orders is not protected by presidential immunity. This is where the legal protection Trump expected begins to collapse. The ruling was clear. A sitting president does not have immunity from criminal contempt of court. The arrest warrant still stands. The emergency stay Trump wanted was denied. No more delay, no more legal tricks, no more hiding behind the office. Now watch how Congress moves fast.
House Democrats now poised to issue a blunt ultimatum to Vice President Pence tomorrow, invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump by Wednesday, or they'll make the president the first ever to be impeached twice.
I think every day he's in office, he remains a real and present danger to the country.
Pence, seen late today arriving at the White House, is said to oppose implementing the 25th Amendment. So Democrats today introducing a single article of impeachment accusing President Trump of, quote, inciting violence against the government of the United States. The charge right now reads in part, President Trump gravely endangered the security of the United States and its institutions of government. He therefore betrayed his trust as president.
Federal marshals now have a legal path forward if they choose to act. Think about how humiliating that is for Trump. He spent years talking about law and order while treating the legal system like something he could bend whenever it suited him. He demanded that a judge be impeached just because that judge ruled against him, and now the highest court in the country has told him in writing that he is not above the law. Within hours of the ruling, lawmakers filed formal articles of impeachment. The charges are serious: defying the courts, violating judicial orders, breaking the oath of office, and interfering with Pentagon operations for political theater. This next part shows how the Senate trial could unfold. The evidence is not vague or weak. It is built on documents, Pentagon memos, contempt findings, Trump's own public statements, and now the Supreme Court ruling itself. Congress is no longer guessing. It now has the highest court in the country strengthening the legal foundation. The speed of this process is stunning. Lawmakers are reportedly preparing to vote within 72 hours. That is how quickly this is moving. Trump could be heading toward another impeachment, but this time it feels different. First, the House votes. Then the Senate moves into trial mode. House managers present the evidence, the court orders, the memos, Trump's own words, and the full record of defiance. Now let's see what happens if power shifts. Senators from both parties are forced to decide whether a president can ignore the courts and still remain in office. If the votes come together, Trump is convicted and removed from power. The constitutional process works exactly the way it was designed to work. After that, Vice President J.D. Vance is sworn in as president. The transfer happens through the succession clause. The government does not collapse. The system continues. Vance steps forward, addresses markets, the military, and law enforcement, and tries to restore order. The message becomes simple. This crisis is being handled through the Constitution, not through chaos. This is where Trump faces the consequences he spent years trying to avoid. Then comes the part Trump has spent years trying to avoid. Once removed, federal marshals can take him into custody. He can be booked, fingerprinted, and processed like anyone else facing serious legal consequences. The man who spent years acting like accountability was only for other people may finally face the same rules he thought would never apply to him. Then Trump's criminal trial moves forward in federal court without the same immunity arguments hanging over everything. Obstruction, contempt, witness tampering, and other charges move into focus. The delays weaken. Prison time becomes a real possibility. Finally, this moment becomes a test of whether the system still works. At the same time, the Republican Party is forced to confront life after Trump. His most loyal supporters will be furious. The party may fracture. Some will defend him until the very end, while others shift toward Vance or a different leader without the same legal baggage. That is why unrest outside the Capitol keeps flaring. Trump's base knows time is running out. They are not reacting out of confidence, they are reacting out of fear. But the bottom line is simple. The Supreme Court reminded the country that no one is above the law. The House is acting, the Senate is preparing, and the constitutional system is moving the way it was built to move. Trump tested the limits, and the Republic answered. He thought the rules were for everyone else, but now those same rules are closing in around him.